Okay, Erev Tov, and welcome to our webinar on the King and Queen. The King or Queen is in the field, letting nature prepare you for the days of awe. And welcome to anyone who's watching this and recording, and welcome to Lisa and Judith, Lisa Rappaport and Judith Schmidt, who are with me on Zoom right now. I'm going to now share my screen so that you can hear a shofar and see a shofar blowing in the field, I hope. So could you hear that okay? Because I did tell it to share this sound. That was a button that I just discovered right before we got started this evening. I'm learning something new with Zoom basically every minute, right? So anyway, that was the shofar, and it was in the field, and we'll be hearing more about the field this evening. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing. Are you both familiar with using Zoom, right?
With what?
Yeah, with using Zoom. Are you familiar with your options on Zoom? You can view your screen in different ways and so on. You're happy, okay. I can tell you about it another time too if you'd like. So, well, since there's just really a very small group right now, maybe some people will come in later, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves to one another and say something about yourselves. So Lisa, do you want to say something? Unmute yourself and say something. Okay.
Sure. So my name is Lisa Rappaport, and I want to attribute my total love of the month of Elul to you, Rabbi Julie. Just quick background about me is that I started as a congregant with Rabbi Julie and Chico 16 years ago, and under her leadership and guidance, am now a rabbinical student. And ironically, back where I started as the spiritual leader of the synagogue where Rabbi Julie was the rabbi. So that's a nice full circle.
So exciting, so exciting. Thanks. And Judith, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Well, the only thing I would like to say right now is that I have a love of this period from Tisha B'Av to Sukkot. It just is a very deep period for me, and this is the 10th year that I've been following Alan Liu's book. Mm-hmm. Every year it has a different color pen for my notes, and I keep a journal.
Oh, nice.
And I meditate, and I just find it a very, very deep place of becoming new, being open to what will be new for me. So I love this period.
That's wonderful.
I cherish it, yeah.
That's wonderful. And the book that you mentioned is Alan Liu's book, the late Alan Liu, Rabbi Alan Liu, This Is Real and You're Completely Unprepared, which is just a wonderful, very moving and very meaningful book. So thank you for reminding us about that. Now, Judith, I'm going to put you on mute just so that we have good recording quality and we can hear the speaker best. But if you ever want to talk, I can unmute you, but also in your lower left-hand corner, there's a little microphone where you can mute and unmute yourself by touching that. Okay. So I wanted to share, I think you guys know, but I started Wellsprings of Wisdom as a website. And also let me know if you have any trouble hearing or anything like that. I started it as a website, a few years ago. I made it as a website myself on Squarespace, and then I got a professional to really make it look nicer for me on WordPress, and I've been more than blogging. I mean, it's more than just a blog because it's a whole website which has a lot of different media on it, and I've asked other people to contribute to it. And then I branched out into Instagram, where I do post a lot of, I really got into nature photography, and that's mirrored on a Facebook account for Wellsprings of Wisdom. And I feel this is some of my yi'ud, this is what I've been put on earth to do, to share my intense love of nature and my love of the wisdom in Jewish sources, and especially where they reveal their deep symbolism, a symbolism that connects our souls, us to our souls, and motivates us to do, to care for others and to care for planet Earth. And I think I'm branching out with Wellsprings into doing more things with my photography. I have some ideas of different things I can make with it that I think would be inspirational materials for people with the photos. I'm leading a lot of outdoor programs here locally with my congregation. I'm leading outdoor walks that have spiritual content. And I'm also even working on a spiritual and nature-based memoir right now. And so tonight's webinar is a learning experience for me as well as for you. And in the next hour or so, maybe a little longer than an hour if it's okay with you, I hope to give you some tools and some inspiration for renewing your year in nature. And to understand that by doing that, you're also connecting to some venerable Jewish and other traditions. So it's not going to be perfect. And in fact, the people that are on the call with me right now know that I had to start over because I had a technical difficulty. But you will get your money's worth because it is free. Although really, I should pay you because you are the ones who are helping me to learn about this whole process. And hopefully we'll all benefit. And even those who are watching this later as a recording will benefit. So there's going to be some media this evening or this afternoon for some of you, some light learning, some sharing, and I do have homework for you, but it's fun homework. I emailed out some resources, including all the media that's being shared tonight. So Elul is this, as we mentioned, is the lunar month before Rosh Hashanah. All of the Hebrew months are lunar months. And this is a classic Jewish season of self-examination and renewal, known in Hebrew as teshuvah, return. It's a time for tzedakah, extra charity, for special late night or early morning prayers, slichot, and for making amends with our friends. And Lisa Rappaport, who is with us right now, has a wonderful website she mails out, and it's on Facebook, and that's Elul Tool, so I sent you the link to that. And I wanted to ask you participants with me this evening, Judith and Lisa, why do you think, just as far as the seasons, of course, the seasons in the Northern Hemisphere, why do you think that this is a particularly auspicious time of year for doing this kind of work, this kind of inner work of stock taking and making amends? Granted that we're supposed to do this work throughout the year, but this is a special season when it's really emphasized. So I'd like to hear from you if you think there's something about the season that motivates you a little bit more than you might be in other times of the year, if you like. And in this case, we're a very small group, so you can just wave, you can just unmute and speak if you want, or just wave at me. We don't have to go through any special protocol. Okay.
I'll go.
Yeah.
So a couple of things come to mind. I think that it's in sync with some of the other more secular rhythms of people going back to school, having been off, in the summer, having a good time, and being in rhythm with that sort of academic year. And the academic year, I think, is in sync with a natural cycle, which is the fall, which is when, there's a lot of shedding of old things, like
nice.
Come off the trees, that we can prepare for something new to come forth. So that's what comes to mind for me.
I really like that word, the shedding. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Judith, do you have any thoughts about why this time of year seasonally works?
Outside of my door on my deck, there's a bush, taller than I am, and I always think of her as the lady. I don't know why. She's very graceful, and I watch her now with her leaves turning yellow, and I watch her through every season, and she reflects me to myself. I could feel in myself what wants to fade, what's ready to fall away, and to know that, something needs to become barren before something new blooms. So she's a companion of mine along the way. I call her my lady.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
There's a sadness to it, to shedding, but there's also a very deep gratitude for the cycle, you know, like to be able to let things that are used up go. And there's, for me, there's a sadness with that. But there's also, I don't quite know how to say it other than a gratitude.
Thank you. Well, that was beautifully described as ever. And I also think, well, maybe poignancy is the word. You know, it's a sort of a poignant season. I do think that this time of year, and maybe for those of us who are not in the school mode, like when you're younger and the kids are going to school, that's kind of that rhythm. But now when I look at the changing of the year in the fall, I think a little bit of my own phase in life, you know, the phase that I'm at, kind of in the autumn of life, or the beginning of the autumn of life, whatever that might mean. And as I see the changes in the fall, I think about impermanence, or I don't have to think about it. I feel it all around me, the impermanence, the beauty. It's just at its peak of beauty and just kind of fading out of that, right? And there's a beauty in that. We'll see a little bit of that later. Seeing the changes, as you all mentioned, a sense of that things aren't permanent. Much as both of you said, and also at the same time, it's embarking kind of almost on the harvest season, right? There's certain harvests that are happening, and I think all of that gives impetus for reflecting on our own lives, reflecting at least on the year gone by, and perhaps when people are living in a more agrarian, and for those who are today, farmers today and living in an agrarian world, when you finally get to the harvest, you have a little more time to sit and take stock than when you're busy growing things. So all of that. And today when I was walking in Rockefeller State Park, as I often do, I found, and I tried to get near the fields and take some video. So I'm going to share that in a moment, just as best as I can. It's kind of overgrown. It's just overgrown and blooming out and rich and fading, and it's energetic, and it's still green. There's beginning to be hints of different colors, right? Of yellow, maybe a little red, a brown, and it's so buzzing. And there's all the insects, the cicadas and the grasshoppers and bees and so on. It's very vital and energetic. So I sense the word field in different ways, a field of interactions as well as the physical field in which I was strolling in the forest. So I'm going to again, try to share my screen, and I'm going to share some video that I took, which is, I'm just going to share it as it is on Instagram, so it's not ideal. It won't look perfect, but for today, I hope it'll work, and at least you can get a sense of what I was seeing today. So again, we're going to try this. I have to work on this, and I definitely, okay, I want to show this. Hold on. All right. Sorry. All right. Okay. Sorry, guys. It's taking me a moment. I could have paused my. I could have paused the recording, but that's all right. Okay. Now I'm going to try to share the screen. This is all part of my learning process, so thank you. Okay. So we're going to see my Instagram page and my stories today, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. All right. Let's try this. Can you see it? Oh, sorry, you're muted. There were many, many insects.
What is that?
Some kind of a wasp. This class is not good for people who are afraid of bugs, because I like bugs. On the asters, which are actually the goldenrod that is blooming right now next to the asters. And this tree always seems to really embrace me when I walk into the park. And as I look in the ripples, well, we talk about ripples later, but you can see the ripples that touch one another in the water. Like drops of rain, or drops were falling from the trees into the water. and the insects and the little worlds within worlds and the kind of drying field, plants in the fields and the milkweed and so on. And those little yellow spots are even smaller bugs, some kind of aphid. Yes. Okay, moving on from the bugs. We'll go to some, now looking at the field as a whole and just hearing the sounds of the field, kind of feeling the energy of the field. You have to imagine in the air, there's kind of moist today, getting cooler. You can hear the cicadas and the grasshoppers, crickets. And these cabbage white butterflies that come out in this time of year. And this was another field. One that sometimes there's a sheep graze in this field. That's how they mow the field later. And then I put this little stream is where I did my little casting, the ceremony of casting things into the running water, although the water is very low right now. It's a trickle. But it often makes me think of the water, the soft water wearing away the hard stone, as Rabbi Akiva said. Soft water can wear away hard stone, so the Torah can enter my mind. And here I just really felt that I put a hashtag there, life force energy, just such an energy that is just buzzing and interacting and flowing right there. And this was a few of the denizens, the grasshopper, and some of the wabi-sabi, this Japanese word for the beauty and impermanence. Okay, and that's the end of my little story. So I'll stop sharing. So I hope you like that. So I wanted to ask you, well, what's the last time you got out into a field or that you went out for a walk in nature, and what did you observe? I know out on the West Coast it's still pretty summery, but when do you see the changes? What are you seeing? Anything you want to share? Lisa, do you want to share anything that you've seen lately?
Well, you know, I live right across from Bidwell Park now, which is another amazing park. And I've been running through the park regularly, but what I realized when I run through the park, I have my earbuds in, and I'm, you know, usually listening to some Jewish podcast or something, and it's like, maybe, you know, because I heard all your sounds, and it's like, I don't hear that in the park, and I think that's because when I'm in the park, I'm plugged in, and I need to unplug. But one sound I have noticed lately is that the leaves when they get dry and they fall on the sidewalk, and they have that sound of the crisp leaves, rustling on the sidewalk is definitely a fall. So, and I do hear the crickets at night when I'm in bed, and I don't have my earbuds in. But, yeah.
And I remember hearing a lot of frogs there in Chico at night. Sometimes very loud ones, which is good, right? And Judith, have you been out in nature recently?
Well, I take the same walk every morning and every night with my standard poodle. And I like walking in the same place morning and evening and kind of sensing the differences in the sounds and the light. But I do miss being walking in a field, and I'd like to join you one day at Rockefeller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I know, Judith, you've written some beautiful meditations about standing in the field of your life. And that is one of the things that really inspired me, that metaphor of our life being a field. Just beautiful.
You know where that comes from? It comes from saying that God is in the field with us at this time of the year.
Perfect. That is the perfect segue, because that's what we're going to share right now is some texts.
Yeah.
So I'm going to now share my screen again. I'm getting really good at this. So let's see. I've got it on, let's hope. Okay, so I've got it on Safaria, which is a website. Can you all see that?
Yes.
I can fan you now at this point. So I have shared the link. I've sent out the link to this. I made a little source sheet on this wonderful website, which is full of lots of free Jewish texts. You can also bring in your own text and make your own source sheets. So I made one, and I'm starting with that very story about the king being in the field. So we could even take turns reading it. Maybe I'll read the first one, and if one of you wants to read after that, we could do that. And now I must say I didn't bring the original. I don't know if this original text was written. I think it was spoken. It was a spoken discourse by the Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, a pietistic Orthodox Jewish movement that's about, well, the whole movement of Hasidism is about 300 years old, and he, I think he was in the 17 to 1800s is his lifespan. So anyway, he probably gave this as a spoken discourse. It was later written up in a collection of his discourses, but it's called Likutei Torah. But I'm just giving summaries here from the Chabad website. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi explains the paradox of Elul with the following metaphor. The king's usual place is in the capital city in the royal palace. Anyone wishing to approach the king must go through the appropriate channels in the palace bureaucracy and gain the approval of a succession of secretaries and ministers. He or she must journey to the capital and pass through the many gates, corridors, and antechambers that lead to the throne room. Her presentation must be meticulously prepared. They must adhere to an exacting code of dress, speech, and mannerism upon entering into the royal presence. However, there are times when the king comes out to the fields outside the city. At such times, anyone can approach him. The king receives them all with a smiling face and a radiant countenance. The peasant behind his plow has access to the king in a manner unavailable to the highest-ranking minister in the royal court when the king is in the palace. The month of Elul, says Rabbi Shneur Zalman, is when the king is in the field. And here's another selection from this word of Torah that he gave, this beautiful metaphor that he gave. I think this is a little closer to his actual wording, and it really goes on longer, but this gives you a little selection from it. Maybe Lisa, would you read this now, obviously? Yeah, be sure you're unmuted though.
Now, obviously, there is a great difference between Elul and Yom Kippur. This concept can be illustrated by way of analogy. Before a king enters a city, its inhabitants go out to greet him and receive him in the field. At that time, anyone who so desires may go out and greet him. He receives them all pleasantly and shows a smiling countenance to all. As he proceeds to his city, they follow him. Afterwards, when he reaches his royal palace, one may only enter his throne room with permission, and this is granted only to the nation's elite, to a select few. To explain the analogy, in the month of Elul, we established a relationship with God within the context of our mundane realities. When we go out to receive the light of his countenance in the field, so to speak, as it is written, God will cause his countenance to shine upon you.
And that's just a small selection, really, from this fuller discourse that he gave. But I think we get the main idea, right? That there's, when it's Rosh Hashanah, it's so formal. We speak of our father, our king, our parent, our sovereign. The services are very formal. We feel a sense of awe and maybe even a sense of distance and transcendence. But during Elul, it's like, so to speak, God is coming to us. The divine is accessible and closer to us. Now, of course, everyone has a different view of the divine, and they may not even be comfortable with this whole idea of a king as a metaphor, but I'd like you to think about it, in different ways. Maybe you can think of it as, at this time of year, my soul connection is perhaps more ready, more accessible. Or I also want to remind us that in case this seems just purely patriarchal and it's all about a king, I want to mention that in the Zohar, which is a great masterwork of Jewish mysticism, I happen to have the privilege of taking a class, and so is Judith actually right now in a class with me with Daniel Matt, who translated the Zohar. So we recently learned that in the commentary on Genesis, that the mystics say that the Shekhinah, the feminine indwelling divine presence, is herself described as a field, a fragrant and verdant field. So we could think of the field as being full of the feminine divine presence. Or we can, if we're more humanistic, we can just think of this, just the energy of life that fills the field. You can see it in any way that's meaningful to you. I also want to look at just a couple of short texts to remind us that this wasn't a new idea, of connecting our spirituality with the field and nature. And actually, I really made the connection. I want to give credit to it as someone I haven't met, but one of my congregants took a class with him. His name's Gabriel Strauss, and he gave me this idea that, okay, it's a metaphor. The king is in the field, the king is close, but this can encourage us to literally go out to a field, to go out in nature to enhance our spiritual connection. And there we find that our ancient ancestors did that, thousands of years ago. So Judith, would you like to read this about Isaac walking in the field toward the evening?
Yes.
Okay.
And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening. Looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself.
So that's the moment of meeting, when young Rebecca is coming to meet her groom, to meet Isaac, her future husband. But the thing I want to emphasize is that he was out, and he'd come out, it says in Hebrew, lasuach basadeh, to meditate in the field. It translates it as walking in the field. But some scholars say this means to meditate or to pray. It's like related to the word siach, conversation. Maybe he was conversing there, conversing with God, conversing with nature. And it's we understand in Jewish tradition that he instituted the afternoon prayers, and his prayers seem to be prayers outdoors in the field in nature. And even no less than Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu in Exodus chapter 3, of course, he meets God at the burning bush, where God says, "Remove the sandals from your feet, and for the ground that you're standing on is holy." It's holy ground. And I think that can also be a cue to us that this world that we have and this earth that we stand upon is a very holy place, and we're privileged to walk upon it and to connect with it. And so my final text that I have here is a prayer of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. This made its way into the Reconstructionist prayer book in one form. And he advocated, this Hasidic master advocated, that we go outside daily and have some alone time in the woods where we pour out our hearts to God. But this is, again, a beautiful expression of connection to nature. So would one of you like to read this? grant me the ability to be alone.
I've somehow lost my full screen, so someone else will have to do it.
Oh, you can adjust your screen in the.
No, I lost my, I don't know what I did. Let me,
well, you work on it.
I'll
Do you
work
want to
on
read it, Judith?
Sure. Grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and grass, among all growing things, and there may I be alone and enter into prayer, to talk with the one to whom I belong. May I express there everything in my heart, and may all the foliage of the field, all grasses, trees, and plants, awake at my coming, to send the powers of their life into the words of my prayer, so that my prayer and speech are made whole through the life and spirit of all growing things, which are made as one by their transcendent source. May I then pour out the words of my heart before your presence like water, O Lord, and lift up my hands to you in worship on my behalf and that of my children. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. I don't know. In the Reconstructionist prayer book, that might have the Hebrew with it. Not sure. Okay, I stopped sharing the screen. I hope you can. I think you can just make your screen bigger if it suddenly became small. Should be able to push something in the top right-hand corner, I think. Okay. So,
Rabbi Julie,
yes.
Is this prayer included in what you sent us?
I sent a link to that page that we just read off, so it will be on there. Yeah. And it's also in the post that I wrote about our session tonight and about the king is in, or queen is in the field. It's also included there at the bottom of the page. So, you know, there's a very popular trend in the world today. It's a Japanese term called Shinrin-yoku, which means forest bathing. Doesn't mean you go take a bath in the forest. It means you go immerse yourself in nature in a forest through a slow and meditative walk. And it sounds something very like something ancient, and it has ancient roots, but it's really a modern concept that was conceived of a few decades ago in Japan. But it's taking the world by storm. I think the nature lovers of the world by storm, because there are Shinrin-yoku groups around the world. There are books on Shinrin-yoku. And basically, you take a nice, slow, and meditative walk. You don't think about how far you're getting. You go out to the woods with an intention to learn from nature, to tune into your senses, just to bask in the beauty and to sort of inhale all the health benefits that come from being close to the trees, right? And you're inspired to offer back your guardianship and care to nature. But I think that these texts show us that this is really something ancient, even in our own Jewish culture. You could call it siyach hasadeh, this being out and conversing in nature, or hitbodedut bateva, to use Rabbi Nachman's terms, hitbodedut, kind of taking some alone time. It doesn't have to be alone. It could be in a group as well. And there are even trainings to become a guide for Shinrin-yoku. And what I'm getting into right now is the writings of the American transcendentalist writers like John Muir, the great conservationist, who, you know, helped found the Sierra Club and Yosemite National Park. And I have a little book of meditations of things that he wrote in his journals that just, they're so beautiful and inspiring and remind me of just the transcendence of just walking around in nature, whether you're up in a spectacular view in Yosemite or the Grand Canyon, or it's in your local park. It could be awesome, right? So I wanted to ask you about your practices in nature, like what kind of things, besides the things that you just mentioned that you did recently, is there some kind of regular nature spirituality practice that you have, or is there one you'd like to develop? And since we're just a small group, we could just share them. Each one of us could share. So Judith, would you like to share first?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, what I'm aware of is when I try to go out very early in the morning with my dog, and she's very quiet. She doesn't go running after anything. She's 14 years old, so we're both elders. And I love to just listen to the sounds and uh, and feel the shift in the leaves and in the branches, and become very aware of when I'm ahead into the day, when I'm planning or whether I'm rehearsing or considering, and then I say, oh boy, come on back, you know. So it's really a meditative walk for me.
Bring yourself into presence, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And I do the same thing in the evening, because I find myself in the evening, you know, the light is different, everything there is different, but I'm still reviewing the day.
Yeah.
I said, wait a second, I'm not here, you know. And yesterday when I was walking Bella, I was somewhere else and she pulled the leash. And I realized I could have fallen because I was not present, you know. So it's a practice that I feel very devoted to.
That's wonderful. And the way you described, oh, sorry.
And then the other thing that I do while I'm walking, if it comes spontaneously, and it usually does, I sing a nagun of gratitude, you know, and then I talk out loud a little bit, you know. So that's my nature. But again, it's the same place every morning and every night, and it's not a big field. It's a, you know, it's not like you're at Rockefeller.
Well, it doesn't have to be very big. I've read in these Shinrin Yoku books that some people say they go out for 2 to 4 hours and they maybe go a quarter mile. That would probably be, I feel like that would be too small of a space for me, but who knows, if I really was in the moment and in the place, maybe it wouldn't be, right? And I love the way you describe, or the way that you do it morning and evening, because that's like Shacharit and Ma'ariv. Reb Zalman, our teacher, talked a lot about really being in nature and really feeling the rhythms of the day. That's what Shacharit and Ma'ariv and Mincha, morning, afternoon, evening prayers were built around the times of day. What about you, Lisa? Do you, besides the running, or is that?
Running in the park. And it's a weird answer to your question, but I feel like being plugged into the Jewish calendar automatically links me with nature so much of the time. I mean, even what you just said about Shacharit and Ma'ariv, just noticing, and just Judith, hearing you talk about morning and evening, the whole prayer cycle revolves around that. And then, you know, Rosh Chodesh, like knowing what's happening with the moon and where we are in Jewish time, and all the holidays have some tie back to nature somehow. And so I find that that's one of the things I love about observing the Jewish calendar, because in addition to psycho-spiritual needs sort of being tended to, we are automatically sort of aligned with what's happening in the natural world. So
we just had a spiritual photography walk with a professional photographer and me, and we went to Rockwood Hall, a nearby park. And something that a lot of the participants were surprised to learn is that the Jewish holidays are, you know, tied into the cycles of the moon. And so if you observe them and you know that, you become more just tied into these cycles of nature. Have you seen, there's a new book that came out called The Jewish Planner? I saw it on Instagram and I bought it, and I think they're sold out now, although I'd be happy to give you my copy, Lisa, because it sounds like you'd appreciate it. And it's also available digitally, but it's just a new idea that people came up. Have you seen that? Yeah, I think some young people came up with this great hardcover planner that goes through the cycles of the moon and the seasons and so on. I only have one copy, but I think you can get the digital. Anyway, I think, you know, I was thinking about, as you were talking, for me, the nature photography is a very spiritual practice. And I think that the nature photographers I know are people who really are very devoted to, of course, to conservation, to nature, to the environment. And, but I have to be careful when I do it, and good nature photographers tell me this, that you don't just start taking pictures. You have to really be present and really see Otherwise, you're just kind of objectifying what you see. You really want to see it, because if you just see it through the camera, you're not totally seeing it. And then when you have that vision, then you try to share it with others. You have to see it yourself first, right? And you know that whatever I see, no matter how nice the picture is, of course, it's only one of the senses, and there's all the other senses and the beyond the senses that aren't there. But I try to somehow capture that in the picture. Let's see. That's something about practices. I also, well, I wanted to share just some of my ideas that when you go out in nature, or for the people that might be watching this as a recording, that you start with a kavanah, which is the Hebrew word for an intention. Even if it's an intention I just want to go out and relax, in nature. Or it could be, I want some guidance, or I have a question or something weighing on me that I'm hoping I'll get some inspiration, or I'll just be receptive to nature to give me some kind of response. And I do suggest slowing down. Of course, running is important too. I definitely have as Lisa knows, I used to be more of a runner. Now that I'm doing photography, it slowed me down. But try to sometimes take a slow walk and open to your senses, and perhaps say some of the Hebrew blessings for nature, which maybe we'll talk about another time, and you can find on my website. And the other thing I wanted to remember to say is that we experience, the natural world in different levels, and they correspond to what the Kabbalists would call the four worlds, which in a very simple sense is just the physical, emotional, intellectual, mental, contemplative, and spiritual. And I think when you go out in nature, like when I see people in the park, they are experiencing it on those different levels. And they're really benefiting from all the levels, even if they don't realize it. So there are people that are out in the park, just maybe they're running, and of course, if they've got something in their ear, they are shedding a little bit of it out. But they're out there and they're getting the physical benefits and a lot of unseen benefits, as the Shinrin Yoku advocates know. But they might be out with a friend and they might be talking and not paying that much attention. Like sometimes I see the most amazing things and creatures and birds in the park, and people walk right by. I've even seen, one day I saw like 4 to 6 people on their phones talking loudly, which was a bit of a shame. But people could be out there and they're still, I believe, getting a benefit. It's still lowering their blood pressure, right? It's good for them. But there's another level. I don't want to just say like a hierarchy, like it's higher, but there's other levels. There's an emotional level, those nature photographers maybe that are seeing the beauty, the plein air painters, the people that are trying to capture the beauty, or maybe someone who's a poet writing a poem. They are relating to it on that emotional, creative level. And then there are those who are contemplative, maybe people that see the whole picture. It could even be the scientists that think about the ecosystems of the park and can tell you about all the different animals and species, and they can really appreciate it and describe it as a whole. I think of that as the intellectual world. And then finally, that spiritual world is that sometimes when you're out there in the park and you're being receptive, or you're out in nature, and it doesn't have to be the Grand Canyon or Yosemite, there are just moments where the boundaries dissolve and the inside and outside are no longer so clear, and you really sense your unity with everything about you, those Shema moments, the Echad, the oneness, right? And so in a way, I could say that's the 4 worlds of being out in my park, or the 4 worlds of being in nature. They're all good, and you can benefit from all of them without even knowing it, but maybe we can more consciously attune ourselves to some of those different levels, as we go out. So now, believe it or not, I'm like exactly on track with the time of what I planned. That never happens. Maybe because we have a small group and you're just helping me so much. But I want to show you something else. So I'm going to try again to show you something, which is I'm going to share with you a gallery that I made of some photos that I took while I was out. Okay, let's see. Hold on. I gotta do this. Here we go. While I was walking, and most of these photos are really taken in the month of Elul. There is one that I took in the summer because it was an egret, and I had a picture of an egret in Elul that wasn't as good, so I should share them both. Okay, but these are mostly from Elul. So if you can see this
Oh.
Can you see it?
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. So the butterfly, which is a pearl crescent, I believe it's also pearl crescent butterfly, on top of the echinacea flower. The flower is, you know, starting to fade, and it's got little bites in it, maybe from insects, and it's just becoming old. But there's a certain special beauty to it, and that's what the Japanese term wabi-sabi means. And then there's another one, and this was out at another nature preserve. Actually, this wasn't at Rockefeller Park. It was in Otter Creek in Mamaroneck. And so then also I see at this time of year, especially a lot of spider webs. Sometimes they're covered with beautiful, beautiful raindrops or dewdrops. And to me, well, each of these things that I see in nature often has a symbolic meaning to me. So when I see the spider web, I think of the connections, the web of life, how we're all connected in this web. Now, of course, to the insect caught in the web, it's not a web of life. To the spider, it is a web of life. It's providing their food. But, you know, to a human being, I see the beautiful web of everything, all the connections how we're really connected to everything and everyone. And then the ripples also, which I showed you in the video. Whenever I see ripples in a lake or in a pool, I think about how when we take an action, when we do something, whether it's good or bad, the ripples flow outward, and we just don't know where they end and who they'll touch. So I always find the ripples and the circles in the pool or in a lake just give me a lot of room for contemplation. Now I have the grasses. So the grasses to me are beautiful. This was some pampas grass at Otter Creek. And grasses are beautiful, but in the biblical tradition, they remind us of brevity because they bloom quickly and they fade quickly. And Psalm 103 compares our lives to grass. It's beautiful, it's brief, appreciate the moment and be in the moment. And if someone has got the phone, you could just mute yourself. Okay. So sheep in the field, I happened to see this last year, actually. I took this picture in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And as I was walking along, all of the high holiday melodies were in my head, including, you know, Unatana Tokef, where God is described as a shepherd and we're like the flock. And suddenly I came around the corner and saw these sheep out in the meadow near the meadow that I showed you in the videos. And I think of the 23rd Psalm and the sense of my own creatureliness. And then I have the reflections. So this is reflections at Rockefeller State Park. You might look like sky. It's actually the sky reflected in the lake. And some other reflections that's at Otter Creek. When I see reflections, I think about the mystical concept, the Kabbalistic idea that everything above is connected to, you know, everything below is connected to something above, or as above, so below. Now, again, I don't want to enter into a hierarchical way of thinking, but to me it means like the transcendent world is reflected in the immanent world. That is, the worlds beyond, the spiritual realms are also reflected in our physical realm and vice versa. And, sorry. Let me get through these. Okay. And then there was these beautiful egrets. So this is one that I took last year on this photo walk before I got my new camera. So I put in a more recent one that I took this summer. But the beauty of these egrets and these beautiful birds is very inspiring to me, of course. And on the post that I shared with you, I included this picture with a Navajo prayer about walking in beauty with beauty surrounding us. And I also included the cricket, or not the cricket, actually it's a grasshopper, and a Mary Oliver poem. You know, she's a great poet. She's recently passed on. Great poet of nature. And the poem she wrote about a grasshopper is also in the Reconstructionist High Holiday Prayer Book. And it concludes with this famous line, like, what is it you'll do with your one wild and precious life, right? It's all about the vitality of life and, you know, seizing life and making the most of our lives. And then this is the last picture in the series. I found this perfect little flower, this fading fall flower with a heart shape in it. That was just an amazing find. And I did my own little tashlich where I cast it into that tiny stream. So we think about tashlich as this ceremony that we have on Rosh Hashanah where we throw crumbs or something in the water. And we symbolically throw away our sins, which I just never really got into. I mean, it's a folk custom, right? But like casting away our sins, really? In a way, I think it's an excuse to just to get us outdoors and to be outdoors near flowing water. But what it means to me more is the flow of life and how that's one way to envision life as a flow. Maybe we're flowing with a stream, maybe the stream's flowing through us, right? And I explore that a lot on my website in a whole page about flowing water. But I want to think on Rosh Hashanah, what am I ready to let go of this year? What do I need to let go of this year? And I wrote also on the website, about my own personal tashlich that I created. It's all on that page about flowing water. So you might want to create a personalized tashlich of your own besides the one that you might do with your synagogue. So I wondered lately if you've had any opportunity to just see something in nature that taught you a symbolic lesson. That John Muir said we could learn everything we need to with nature, just from nature being our teacher. Any thoughts? Have you seen anything lately? Whether it was a ripple, a spider web, a butterfly, anything that made you reflect on your life. Lisa, do you want to share something?
It's not anything I saw lately, but just looking at the photos, especially the ones where there were the bites out of the leaves and things. Well, actually, you showed a lot of different things. Things at their peak and then things kind of fading away. And it reminded me of something my daughter Lucy, who's now 12, but when she was about 2.5, just talking, she had noticed a flower that was losing its petals. And this actually made it turned into a haiku that's part of a book I wrote on death and dying. And anyway, what she said was, "Mommy, we all bloom to die." That's what she said.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
We all bloom to die. And she just like this okayness with the cycles, right? And I think that's what nature teaches us, is that all cycles of life and death, cycles of return, it's all normal and natural. And there's loss and it's poignant. I like the word that you used earlier, that it's poignant, like it's bittersweet. Like this is how it must be. And for us to get more okay with that, I think is what nature teaches us.
That's beautiful, Lisa. Thank you. Thank your daughter for being so profound at such a young age. Judith, do you want to share anything?
The only thing I'll share that comes up for me is how now that it's still warm enough, I love to take a chair and sit in front of my lady companion tree bush. I should take a photograph of her and just sit with her and feel her changes as my changes. Will you please hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And just feel, the cycles of life and my awareness now as I approach 86 that I won't keep churning, I'll be what your daughter says, at some point, and just with the poignant awareness of that. So,
I mean, I do think you are still blooming, Judith, at age 86. But I think that as I look at myself in the mirror now that I'm 60, or just look at myself, I'm kind of surprised. Things are wrinkling up, more. There's more. I've always looked kind of youthful for my age, and I notice these changes. And then I'm like, well, that's like the flowers. They have a special beauty to me, actually. They have a new beauty to me, right? And soon we'll see all the colors of fall, especially in this part of the country, this spectacular kind of creative show that happens at this phase of the year. So I try to also be in sync with that. And on the website, I did create a page about seasons, which also, explores the seasons of our life as well as the seasons of the year, and of course the seasons of our planet. If I will share one thing that I saw recently with an animal who taught me a lesson, and it was a wasp. I was just, actually I was at my gym, I was leaving, and I was walking down the hall, and there was a wasp who was trying to get out, and it was just trying to go in a light because it thought that was the way out. So it kept getting stuck in this light, and it was flying into the light like insects will do. And I felt bad for it, but I wasn't going to try to capture a wasp, But I opened a door and it flew out to its freedom. So I thought about that, like my mind, it was a little of a Zen moment for me. Like, how do I obsess about things and think that this light, this glittering thing, whatever it is that I want right now is the thing I'm obsessed with having. Sometimes I'm just sort of like that wasp banging my head against the proverbial light bulb. And if I would just open the door to expansiveness, I could have a whole new perspective. And so that bug taught me a big lesson. And I feel I could learn, as our sages said in the Talmud, we can learn from every creature, from all kinds of animals, and I guess we could learn from bugs too. So I'd like to, as in our last, I said we'd go till 8:45 our time. So in the last moments we have left, I feel like we're ready to go to a deeper level of this idea of the field, if that's okay with you. I want to share something. I didn't actually share this out yet, but I can share it on the screen. It's some deeper reflections about what a field might mean. Okay, so let's see. I hope it'll work. Yeah, it's going to work. Okay. So the first one was from my teacher, Reb Zalman. And he often spoke about the God field, about God being like the field among us, the energy among us, the vision we create together. I don't know, he didn't exactly define it, so we have to define it for ourselves. And in a Rosh Hashanah message that he wrote in 2007, he said these words: all of Israel, all God wrestlers, all of us who will be spending that prayer time during the high holy days will be able to constitute the morphic God field for our entire people and for the whole world with which we will be praying. It is important that in this God field for the coming year, we should be able to be harmonious and inclusive to all branches of Judaism and beyond. All the prayers are being said in the name of all humankind. We are a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, we as a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, should pray for that integration that will make room for everyone and at the same time obligate them to be stewards of God's kingdom on earth. How strange it is to see how in every religion those notions of each being's particular task is to guard the world, to know it as rooted not in our possession but in God's possession. So this was just a small part of what he wrote in this message. But again, this idea that we create a field together, and our prayers on the holidays and our actions together in society create the field that we live in. So that's a much deeper meaning of a field, or just I could say maybe a more expansive meaning. And now, in a yogic point of view, I had remembered from years ago reading this from Deepak Chopra. And so would one of you like to read this, The Field of All Possibilities? He often speaks of that, and it's a yogic idea that when we enter the silence of meditation, we enter this field of possibilities. Someone want to read that?
I can read it.
Okay.
Practicing silence periodically as it is convenient to you is one way to experience the pure potentiality. Spending time each day in meditation is another. Ideally, we should meditate at least 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening. Through meditation, you will learn to experience the field of pure silence and pure awareness. In that field of pure silence is the field of infinite correlation, the field of infinite organizing power, the ultimate ground of creation where everything is inseparably connected with everything else.
And he, elsewhere in this article, which I can send out the links to where these came from, but he talks about also the importance of being outside nature. So that's another venue for that meditation to take place. This going deep inside, this is in every spiritual and mystical tradition. Inside of us is this field of pure potentiality. And then finally, there's a very famous poem by Rumi, the great mystic, that there's a field that we could enter beyond all of our concepts, beyond all of our self-defense. And Judith, would you like to read this? I'll have to scroll it up for you, but can you read that?
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. It's beautiful.
So I think field, if we meditate on this concept of field, it can mean so many things. It can mean things in science, you know, all of the objects that, and all of the atoms that are interacting with each other in the various quantum fields and, right, field things that are way beyond my pay grade. But these spiritual fields that are out there somewhere and that are also deep inside of us. I saw both of those there. A field out there, a transcendent field, and a field deep inside. And the immanence, really maybe they're one and the same. And in all of them, the Queen is in the field, the Shekhinah is in the field, in filling nature, immanent with us, and the King is in the field, the transcendent is joining us here in our field, and maybe even in our field of endeavor, our field of work, our fields of interest, our fields of commerce. This is the time that we can sense that. And I think getting out in nature is, you know, one of the most special ways for us to do that. And I hope we'll continue to do that through the year. I mean, I'm just coming to connect to the holidays and the seasons more in these deeper and symbolic ways. I enjoy the details of them. I enjoy the texts, but I also enjoy looking for the deep depth psychology and the archetypes of these holidays. So I think we're getting to our last few minutes of the webinar, and I really appreciate you guys. I couldn't have asked for, of course, more spiritual and better companions to learn with this evening, and I hope some other people will get to listen to it later and enjoy it too. I appreciate you helping me learn and the technical and side of it and all the sides of it.
And thank you, Rabbi Julie, for your teaching.
Sorry?
Thank you for your teaching.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you your homework now. So your homework is, since you already like to be outside in nature, to take, if you have a camera, you could take it, or just take your cell phone camera and just send me a picture of something you saw, and maybe you can describe if it meant something special, you learned something, or just it's nice, I liked it. And just tell me where it was, where you took the picture, and I'd like to create a post on Facebook or maybe on my website. And then kind of, if you want to give me extra credit, I would love for people who signed up for this to make a comment on my website, Wellsprings of Wisdom, not just on my Facebook page, because all I do is just delete spam bot comments all the time, and I'd love to have a comment from real people that I really like. Okay. And I'd like to hear back from you later. If you'd like to keep learning in the future, what kind of learning you'd like to do, what you learned, what you enjoyed, what would make it better, ideas you have for Wellsprings, I'd love to do that. I'm so honored that you joined me tonight. And for all those who are going to listen to it later, I hope you enjoy it and that you send me pictures too of nature. So, L'Shana Tova.
Yes.
Katevu b'techatemu, may everyone be written and inscribed and sealed in for a good year in this vast book of life. Amen.
Good to be with you both.
Thank you, Rabbi Julie. Nice to meet you, Judith.
Same here. Good year to you.